It started as a routine investigation until things took a bizarre turn. A police officer responding to a reported break-in found himself in an unexpected mess, quite literally. He was hit with construction foam, a sticky, expanding substance meant for sealing gaps, not for stopping crime. But here's where things get even stranger. The officer had no idea that the property in question belonged to a black U.S. senator. What happened next sent shockwaves through the community. Was this just a case of mistaken identity, or was something more going on? How did a simple response to a break-in turn into a chaotic scene involving law enforcement, a well-known political figure, and an incident that no one saw coming? Stay with us as we break down the full story, what led to this unexpected confrontation, who was really behind it, and why this one mistake could have major consequences. The officer wiped the thick foam from his uniform, confused and frustrated. He had arrived expecting to investigate a break-in, not to be caught in some bizarre trap. But as backup arrived and they began piecing things together, the situation only got more complicated. The property owner's name on record didn't stand out at first until someone recognized it. A U.S. senator, and not just any senator, but a well-known black politician who had been vocal on issues of justice and law enforcement. The officers hesitated. Had they just stormed into the wrong place? Was this a setup, or was there really an intruder? As they radioed in for more details, a man approached from the shadows, calm but clearly aware of the chaos unfolding in front of him. Who was he? What was he doing there? And more importantly, how did things go so wrong so fast? The officers turned their attention to the man stepping forward. He was tall, well-dressed, and despite the chaos around him, he didn't look surprised. One of the officers instinctively reached for his radio. "Identify yourself," he demanded. But before the man could answer, another officer recognized him. "Wait, that's Senator Asterisk name Asterisk." A heavy silence fell over the scene. The officers glanced at each other, realizing they might have made a serious mistake. But there were still too many unanswered questions. If this was the senator's property, who had called in the break-in? And why had the responding officer been hit with construction foam? The senator sighed, shaking his head. This is not what it looks like," he said. His voice was calm, but there was tension behind his words. He glanced toward the house, as if expecting someone to step out. The officers followed his gaze. That's when they noticed something strange. A window, slightly open, a flickering light inside. Someone else was here. One of the officers stepped closer to the house, his hand hovering near his holster. The flickering light inside made shadows dance against the walls, but no one seemed to be moving. The senator shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the officers and the open window. "I need you to trust me," he said carefully. "I don't think I'm the only one here." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Was this a misunderstanding, or were they walking into something bigger than a routine call? The air felt heavier now, charged with an uneasy tension. Then suddenly, a noise. A sharp scrape, like metal against wood. "Did you hear that?" one of the officers whispered. Before anyone could respond, the front door creaked slightly open. Every muscle in the officer's body tensed. The senator took a step back. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. Someone was coming. And in that moment, nobody knew if they were about to get answers or face something far worse. The footsteps grew louder, each step echoing in the silence. The officers braced themselves, hands gripping their holsters, waiting for whoever, or whatever, was behind that door. Then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, a figure stepped into the dim light. It wasn't an armed intruder. It wasn't a suspect fleeing the scene. It was a man in a maintenance uniform, his hands raised in surrender, eyes wide with fear. "Please don't shoot," he stammered. "I work here." The senator's expression darkened. "What are you doing in my house this late?" he demanded. The maintenance worker hesitated, glancing toward the open window. I got a call," he said. "Someone told me to come check a gas leak." "I thought you knew." The officers exchanged looks. No one had reported a gas leak. No one had called him. And yet, he was here. Then, as if on cue, a sudden bang echoed from inside the house. Something, or someone, was still in there. The officers spun toward the noise, adrenaline surging. The senator's face tightened, his eyes locked on the dark hallway inside his own home. Without hesitation, one officer pushed the door open wider, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. The maintenance worker stood frozen, fear written all over his face. Then movement. A blur of motion from the back of the house. "Stop, police!" One of the officers shouted, charging inside. The senator followed, his fists clenched. A figure darted toward the back door, knocking over a chair in their escape. The officers rushed after them, but just as they reached the kitchen, the sound of shattering glass filled the air. The suspect had broken through a window and vanished into the night. Breathing heavily, the senator stepped forward. His gaze landed on something on the floor, a small black device with a blinking red light. A recording device. Someone hadn't just broken in. They had been listening, watching, and they were still out there. The senator knelt down, staring at the blinking device. His jaw tightened. "Someone was spying on me," he muttered. The officers exchanged looks, realizing this was no ordinary break-in. Whoever had been here wasn't after money or valuables. They had been listening, gathering information. But why? One officer picked up the device carefully, bagging it as evidence. "We'll run forensics on this," he said. "See if we can trace where it came from." The senator exhaled slowly, glancing at the shattered window. Whoever had done this was already gone, but the message was clear. Someone wanted to know his every move. And they had been close. Too close. As the officers secured the scene, the senator turned to them. "This isn't over," he said. And deep down, they all knew he was right. Outside, the night was quiet again. But somewhere in the darkness, someone was still watching, waiting.